Welcome, everyone, to another Canada Life public webinar. My name is Caroline Workman, and I'm joined by my colleague Laurel Mansfield. We're part of Canada Life's organizational health team. World Mental Health Week 2026 will be observed from May 11th to 17th. Therefore, we feel our topic for today's webinar is very fitting. Coaching up at work, how to advocate for yourself to succeed. If you'd like to watch this presentation in French, please click on the link below to be taken to the French audio and visual. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. Canada Life's head office is in Winnipeg, the ancestral lands of the Cree, Nakota, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Métis peoples, and in the heart of Treaty 1 territory, signed between the Crown and Cree and Anishinaabe peoples and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Canada Life acknowledges the harm of the past, and we respect the history, people, and land in the areas we live and operate. We are committed to building relationships and moving forward in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, guided by shared principles of respect, equality, and collaboration. I'll be introducing our speakers in a moment, but first I'd like to mention that you can ask questions if you like. Depending on what sort of device you're on, you can either submit questions directly on the screen. The box will appear either at the side of your screen or underneath, or you can go on slido.com and enter hashtag CLWellbeing in the field that says hashtag enter code here. You can ask your questions in English or in French. We have a team of moderators who will be reviewing the questions, and they'll be publishing them as they come in, so please keep an eye on Slido. When you see a question that you're interested in, you can give it a thumbs up, as we'll prioritize those questions with the most interest in the time we have towards the end of today's event. We have two panelists today that will help us to better understand what coaching up really means. Whether you're an employee hoping to clarify expectations, a leader wanting to create more supportive conversations, or someone simply seeking more confidence in speaking up, you'll receive tangible tools you can use immediately. As always, we are so pleased to have Marianne Baton with us today, who will lead our discussion. Marianne is the Director of Strategy and Collaboration with Canada Life's Workplace Strategies for Mental Health. Angie Nattengor is a strategic advisor and principal at Nattengor Consulting. She provides consulting services to organizations seeking to create practical and sustainable ways to strengthen workplace health, culture, and productivity. Angie's background includes over 15 years leading transformation, people, and policy initiatives across British Columbia's healthcare and public sectors, including increasingly senior roles in multiple health organizations and at a Crown corporation. Working inside complex systems during periods of growth, restructuring, and transition, she has seen firsthand how employees' psychological health can affect an organization's ability to execute its mandate and priorities. As a result, her approach emphasizes people-centered change, leadership, collaboration, and inclusive engagement, along with practical strategies that fit each organization's context, capacity, and reality. Angie will share her experience and proven strategies on how coaching up can be a positive and empowering experience for employees while supporting their people leaders. And now, Marianne will help us better understand how to coach up.
Thanks, Caroline, and welcome everybody. I'm going to go through sort of the short version of what coaching up is, and then Angie's going to help us bring it alive with her experiences and her stories. So really, the coaching up approach was developed by me originally to help employees who also had mental health issues. What they were saying is they would try to talk to their boss and they would get emotional. And they would break down, and they would find that the person that they were talking to would either shut down or just say, no, get your work done. It would be uncomfortable for both of them. So what coaching up was intended to be was a way for them to have a conversation that was more productive, more useful, and less likely to backfire on them from having a resolution. So it's really helping you to avoid the stress of hiding whatever you're struggling with, whether you have a mental health issue or not. If you're struggling at work and you know that you're not performing the way you want to perform, that there's things getting in the way, you can wait until somebody wants to do a performance review, or you can coach up and get support that you need before that happens. So some of the reasons people don't speak up, you can see if any of these resonate with you, is you might worry that they're going to see you as a complainer, that they're going to get angry that you even asked, like, who do you think you are? You're so entitled and whatever. That you, oh, there you go, that you will act, that you are acting entitled, or that they'll say, you know what, they're not a team player, they can't really do the job, and so when promotion time comes up, you'd get passed over. All of those are reasons why you might not want to speak up, including that you feel that you might lose your job if you do it. Valid fears if you do it in a way that actually is whining, complaining, and not helpful in the workplace. Coaching up is different than that, and that's what we're here to share with you today. So it's not about complaining. The focus is on your work, your job, and it's not on, even if it's happening to you, it's not on your personal issues. It's not saying, I want you to understand my current state of mental health. You know that your family and friends don't understand you. So why would this person at work understand? So we're not bringing the personal issues to them in coaching up. We are focusing on the work. And you're going to be prepared. You're going to be very clear about what it is you need to better do your job at work, not asking them about the things that you need for your health, for your well-being, for your personal issues. And you are going to focus on proposed solutions. So you're going to come ready with some ideas about what would allow you to do your work better. And you're going to be flexible. You're going to know what needs to be different. You're going to give them potential solutions. And you're going to say, if you have another way to deal with this issue for me so that I can do a better job, I'm open to it. So that's sort of the framework there. Preparation is so important that you're not going in just organically having a conversation, especially if you're stressed out, overwhelmed, or dealing with a mental health issue. You want to be very clear that your intention is to do your job well. You want to make sure that what you're asking for is directly linked to improving your performance, your productivity at work, rather than linked to your well-being. Now, let me be clear. If you have a disability that requires an accommodation, that's not what this is. This is when you're struggling to get your job done and you just need things to be a little different. We're going to give you some examples of that. Because if the duty to accommodate exists, it exists, and there's a different process for that, and it does have to do with your personal health. In this case, we're staying focused on the job itself and what you need to do your job well. You're also going to prepare by actually saying the words that you're going to say so that when you actually have the conversation, you're able to say it more calmly with less emotion, and you're able to stay on point. So by practicing this on your own or with somebody that you trust before you go in, you're going to be much more successful. So this is sort of the framework for it. Now, this is really making it simple because we're just saying here's 3 parts to it. You want to lead with, I want to do a good job. I want to do my best work. I want to make sure I meet my objectives. I want to make sure that I meet your expectations. So that's the beginning part. This is helping them to listen from that perspective, not starting with a problem. And then you're going to say, where I'm challenged, what's not working well, what is getting in the way of me doing my job, what it is that is problematic. And you're not going to say it's Marianne because she's a pain in the neck. You're going to say it's when I'm being interrupted, for instance. And you don't have to say names. If they need more information, you'll do it. But this is what's getting in the way of me doing my best work. And here's what I've already tried. Here's what I'm already doing to show that you're not just expecting them to fix everything for you, that you are um, taking active responsibility for your success at work. So ultimately, you're going to focus on job outcomes and solutions and not on complaints, even though those complaints may be very valid. Okay, I just lost my little clicker. There we go. So just an example, you start the conversation, you can say, yeah, I'd really like to do my very best when I'm at work. And I wonder if you're open to hearing what I think can support me to do better. It's very unusual that they'd say, no, I don't care whether you can do better or not. And then you can say, I've discovered some of the things that I can do for myself that better support me. And you can say what that is. You know, I understand now that if I take my break, my focus when I come back is so much better than if I work through it. You could say, I have taken and put on noise canceling headphones when I'm not on call so that that can help me stay focused, whatever it is that you already do to support your own success. And then share your potential solutions. So if we stay with the idea that you're distracted by noise at work, even if the noise is me, you don't need to say that, but that when you're distracted by noise, you lose focus. And then you're saying, could I get or use, if they already exist, noise canceling headphones, or could I move somewhere that's a little off the beaten track, that's a little quieter? Could I get a barrier around my workstation so that I'm less distracted? But also, and that's where we say about being flexible, or if you have other solutions that can help me to focus, that can help me to not be distracted, I'm open to learning them. So the conversation itself, you're going in with something specific. You then compromise or listen to what they say. But once you have that, especially if you were worried about you not being up to standard, you not performing at your best, you not measuring up, you want to say, how will you measure my success on the job? Because what you want to make sure of now is, okay, they've said that they would do these things for me, but what are they going to be looking at? You know, is it how many widgets I make? Is it how many calls I take? Is it whether or not I'm interacting with others in a professional manner? You need to know this so that you don't have that generalized stress or anxiety about whether they're watching you and whether you are living up to expectations. This clarity can significantly reduce stress and struggle because you can objectively know what you need to do. So some of the benefits of coaching up include getting support before it's a performance issue, right? That you're being proactive that way and you're getting the help that you need to do your job. It's also that it's an opportunity to clarify what the expectations and priorities are. And the reason that I say this is so many people, and especially those that are dealing with common conditions like stress, anxiety, depression, the idea that you feel like you're never enough, you're never good enough, you're never doing enough is pretty pervasive. And being able to say, oh no, I understand exactly what you want and I can give you that. It also reduces misunderstandings that they think maybe it's a morale problem, maybe it's an attitude problem, and you know it's something else, and it can strengthen your relationship. So I want to now turn to Angie Nattengore. And really, Angie, I know you've been through times where you tried to coach up and it didn't go so well. And I know that you, on your own, refined your approach to be closer to what we're talking about, and you had better success. And I'm wondering if you can share that with us. And Luke yeah, thank you. Okay, Angie, go ahead.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Marianne. And thanks for the context around coaching up. I'm sure that will be helpful for everyone. And I think, with my experience, so for context, many years ago, I was managing a team at a large organization, and we were responsible for guiding development of certain types of documents. And so a lot of that was ensuring content was up to date, engaging others to ensure that we were getting feedback on these documents, that sort of thing. And so, speaking with our colleagues, we had identified this need to support them in how to gather feedback. It was a large organization, like I said, so often they had to gather feedback from multiple sources, and it was taking a lot of time to do that. And so they were asking our team for help with streamlining that process. And so we had found an existing process that had been in use at a similar organization, and that we wanted to try in our organization. And so it was really a change management exercise. So it was a new process that was going to be put in place that affected a lot of various staff and leaders from across the organization. And so our team was accountable to a committee, and that committee was made up of a number of senior level staff members, including an executive director from our department, as well as our executive sponsor, who was a vice president from our organization. And so, in order to move forward with such a high visibility project and process, we needed their approval. And so, the way that we pitched it was we would run it as a pilot, using that as a starting point, and then we would evaluate it after a year to see if we were missing or meeting any of our intended outcomes, where we could improve, that kind of thing. And so we started this pilot, and then somewhere in the middle of it, this is important to note, there are a number of different leadership changes. So the person that I was reporting to, who had been incredibly supportive of this new process and the direction, left their position. And then our department's executive director had also left, and a new interim executive director had taken their place. And so when it came time to actually conduct the pilot evaluation, on behalf of my team, I went back to the committee to give them a status update on the pilot to date. And then that, again, a reminder that the next steps were to do this evaluation. And then, to my surprise, I received a lot of pushback from the executive director, who was new on the team and part of this committee. And this person did not want us to do this evaluation. They didn't feel the time was right. They asked us to shelve it for the time being. And so that was an incredibly frustrating experience to me, because we had been working on this pilot for almost a year. We felt that this was something that was really crucial to our work. We'd put a lot of very clear, transparent communication out to the whole organization about why we were trialing this process. We committed to all these various interest holders that we were going to evaluate and share the findings. And so, I think upon reflection, there were a number of reasons why this didn't work. When I'd gone back to the committee with the updates and to confirm that we were going forward with this evaluation, I think I just took it for granted that we were going to go ahead, because that was a decision that had been made, but that decision had been made nearly a year ago. And two leaders that were part of that committee had since left and been replaced. And so essentially, while some of the committee members were familiar with that approach and why we were doing it, that new executive director in particular did not have all the information that they needed. So they hesitated in saying yes to what we were doing, and they just weren't convinced that the approach was the right one. So that's sort of the context and the example of where it didn't work.
So can I just share something here, Angie? And that is because we've been through that scenario many times, where you have an understanding and an agreement and a relationship, and then it all shifts. And one of the things that I advise all employees to do is, when there's a change in leadership, is to ask, how do you want this that I'm working on to reflect on you? what would be the positive outcomes for you? And of course,
Mhm.
we don't know that till after we've faced what you faced.
Yeah.
And so maybe you and I today can help a few people not to make the same mistake we did, which is assuming that because it was approved, it's approved. And yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you do? How did you go back to the rest of the team on that?
Yeah, so it was quite frustrating, I think, for a lot of us, and because, as I said, we'd been working on it for a year, um, and that's just it, Marianne. Like a lot can change in a year. So not only were there leadership changes, but perhaps some of the priorities had shifted. So um, we felt that they hadn't, but maybe there was something that we didn't know, right? So
Yeah.
I think we felt it was and as the leader for that team too, some of it is expressing my frustration, but also like let's think about how we can reframe this and what our next steps will be.
Yeah. And that's another interesting point because sometimes I have been told, no, you can't do that like you did. And I go back and take what their concerns were, what they thought, it's not the right time and there's reasons why not to do it. And I will modify to try to make it fit better and go back and try again. But you've also had some positive experiences. Do you want to share some of those with us?
Yeah, and so it's the same committee and the same project. And so after hearing that pushback from the executive director, it was really clear that, the approach that I needed to take needed to be different. But hearing the pushback, I did have more information to work with. And so thinking about how to reframe that, what I had done was I almost recruited my director and that vice president, who was the executive sponsor for this work, because they were both allies of the work, and I just wanted to get their perspective on how best I could almost like remessage this and what do I need to consider. And so with their help, what I ended up doing was going back to the committee and repositioning things a little bit for the executive director. And so instead of coming back with what I'd done originally, which was this evaluation was already planned and taking it for granted, I went back to the beginning. And so I raised the fact that this was like the why for this project, right? So that we created this streamlined process, and this was in response to a need that had been identified by our colleagues. I communicated, what our intended outcomes for that pilot were and what we'd been hoping to achieve, and then the plan for the evaluation and what that was, including the objectives and the methodology that we'd originally identified, and walked this person through the proposed process. But instead of telling them what we were doing, what I did was I asked for their input regarding the approach, and then stayed open to feedback and further concerns, and essentially just shifted like what I was talking about from this was what was originally decided to, if we conduct this pilot evaluation, this is what's in it for the organization and the team and all of those who've already been participating in it to date. And then that got a much better reception. Part of it, I think, for me, just as an observation, was just recognizing that this person was brand new to the work. They hadn't been around when those original decisions had been made. And so I think, and you spoke about this in the presentation already, Marianne, about like, how do we position something and understand what their priorities are? And so, especially with senior leaders, like this one project is one very small piece of the pie in terms of everything that they're looking at and everything that they're working on and responsible for. So I think it's important to remember sort of like, where are they coming from? What information do they need? And then that can help you better advocate for the thing that you're asking about, either whether it's for support or, a direction that you're proposing, but just making sure that you know who your audience is and how do you frame that in a way that will be impactful to them.
Yeah, it's funny, Angie, because you're sort of going into another piece of resources that we have at Workplace Strategies, which is motivating the powers that be. And that in there, we talk about knowing what matters to them. What is it that they're going to get measured on? What are their strategies, goals, ambitions, hopes? And how can what you're proposing help them with that? so that we put the idea for us. Coaching up is just a little lower down, that it's just us individually looking to get something that we need to be effective. Have you ever had a situation, and I know you have, that's why I'm asking the question, where it was just about you trying to get something to make your job, not being responsible for an entire project and an entire group?
Yeah,
So,
of course. Yeah. And I think, like anytime, it's interesting hearing you talk about the mental health issues, and I'm certainly one of those folks who suffers from perfectionism from time to time. And so, but it's impossible to be perfect. And so I think, being open to having conversations with your leaders about what is it that you're doing well, but also what areas do they see that you can improve in. And so for me personally, I've had some amazing leaders who, whenever I've had this conversation about my performance, it's really been around, like coming at it also with here's what I think I bring to the table, and here's where I think my strengths are. Here are some areas that I think I can develop in, particularly if it's related to the specific role or the job, and maybe even like a leadership in future, right? So when I was younger and early in my career, is definitely like what do I need in order to grow my leadership skills, and but like you say, bringing solutions and options too. So, I had done my research before and looked at what are the internal programs that we have for development, what are some external ones, and then presenting those. So then you can have a conversation with your leader about what makes sense for me right now, and what's in sort of in the ability of the organization to help you. Because I think part of it too is understanding that you might get a no, but it opens the door to further conversation and just a more trusting and respectful relationship with your leader.
right. I had a woman once who went to her leader and said, I need the corner office. And the corner office really only belonged to the top level executives. So it was a strange request to begin with. And she said, it's a human rights issue. And if you don't give me the corner office, I'm going to file a complaint. And when I went and spoke to this woman and said, why the corner office? How will that help you? What she unveiled to me is that she had seasonal affective disorder. But rather than coaching up and saying, I need more exposure to natural light while I'm working, she just had one solution and that was it. And she came. And in the end, we found solutions that helped her to feel better, to do well, and to work it out. But when we go at it with that attitude that you must, that then we get shot down and we feel like we're not heard, we're not validated. Whereas coaching up gives it in a different way. Yeah. Have you had the experience of somebody coaching up to you, asking you for things?
Yeah, of course. As a leader, you get requests all the time, and so I think it's a great example you share about the corner requesting the corner office, or demanding the corner office. More like, I think a lot of the time there is, it's particularly where environments are challenging and maybe staff don't feel like they're being heard in other respects, and from certain colleagues. And so I've had requests from folks who worked for me around, I need you to deal with this person, for example.
Yeah.
And so, then it's a matter of backing that up, right? And really trying to identify what's happened, right? And asking those questions around, like, what do you feel has what is happening, I guess, like what do you feel is the challenge here? What do you, but also part of it is, as a leader, part of it is like you say, uncovering what are the actual motivations underneath, or what's the underlying need. But also, I'm of the mind that, like, I'm not going to just go deal with that person because you told me to deal with that person. How can we figure this out together and, try to empower that staff member to actually maybe even coach up with on a kind of like at a colleague level, right? So if this individual, for example, is being difficult, it's like, what conversations did you have with this individual? Did you actually raise the concerns that you're feeling, the ones that you're sharing with me? Did you raise them with that person? And that can be really scary though, right? And so I'll acknowledge that. And so I'm a big proponent of planning your conversation, right? Especially if you feel like it might be contentious or a difficult one to have. Um, Having a few bullet points, like you said, Marianne, earlier, saying those things out loud can really go a long way in helping you like have that conversation with somebody, especially if you're feeling nervous or you're feeling a little fearful about having it.
Mhm. So I want to encourage people that if you have a question about a particular situation, or of course, we don't want any names, we don't want any identifying information, but how would you coach up if this is the issue? Please feel free to put that in Slido, and we will do as many of those as we can to look at different ways that we can get at it. And, Angie, I think some of it is the different personalities, right? Some bosses are so easy to coach up to because they want to help, they want to solve problems. Others are a little intimidating. And a boss that's intimidating for me might be a piece of cake for you. And that's always been interesting to me, right? That there's certain personalities that are more challenging, more intimidating. What type of leader or boss do you find most challenging to
Oh, that's
coach up to?
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one um where maybe their motivations aren't as clear as some others. And so certainly some leaders I find keep things a lot closer, what's the expression, closer to the vest
Yeah.
than others. And so I think in that regard, I find it difficult because, if some versus somebody who is very clear about their intentions, or they share their performance, or their action plans, for example, right? Or their
Yeah.
priorities that they've identified for the year. And so if you have somebody, or maybe even like in the situation that I shared, somebody who's new to you and you haven't met them before and you don't know what they're like. So I think there could be a whole host of reasons for feeling like somebody is difficult to coach up to. But I think it comes back to, again, like trying to have those conversations. I think it's a skill, right? Like anything
It
else.
is. Yeah.
It's definitely, you have to practice it, and it's not going to feel good probably the first few times, especially if you're not comfortable, you're feeling strange about it. But the more that you practice them, and even with the same leader, if it's a leader that you have not had success with in the past, every interaction you have with that person, take it as a learning opportunity, right?
Right.
So almost like look at it and say to yourself, okay, what went well in that conversation, but then what didn't go well, and then how can I adjust my approach for the next time I need to ask for something.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. Really, that's a life lesson, Angie, that when something doesn't go well, take it as a learning experience. What can I
Yeah.
learn from this? How can I grow from it? We even have a resource on the website about dealing with a difficult boss, but in it, we say maybe the boss is difficult for you, but if you go a little bit further and think what's going on for them and how can I respond while they're going through whatever they're going through in a way that's more safe for me, more
Yeah.
effective, but also that is respectful of maybe they're stressed out, maybe they're burnt out, maybe they're overwhelmed,
Yeah.
not that that's a reason for them to cause harm to us, but at least if we see it's not personal, it's what they're going through, it is less harmful to us, right? And we
Yeah.
recognize it's something they're dealing with. So, I'm going to do the key takeaways next, but any last words of wisdom, Angie, that you'd like to leave people with based on your experience?
Yeah, I think maybe one thing um, is that, leaders, if you're feeling like if you're as a staff member, if you're feeling intimidated by a leader, just remember that they're human too, right? So I think a lot of people get nervous about like, oh, I have to talk to this person who's like a director or an executive director or vice president. They're all just humans. And so I think part of it is recognizing that it's about this is about asking for the things that you need in a way, like you say, Marianne, is respectful, but also recognizing that that other person has their own difficulties too, and then they have their own priorities. And so this is really about building bridges and understanding, I think, so that you can have good conversations and advocate for yourself, but then also build that relationship over time as well.
Yeah, such a great point, because the coaching up approach is saying, I want to do a good job. Well, guess what your leader's role is? To make sure you do a good job, right? So you really are supporting them. And that's why this approach is so much more likely to be successful, because you're doing what they need to do anyways. You're kind of doing their job for them, which is to identify where the challenges, the obstacles, the gaps are, and you're giving them some solutions to help you be more effective. So it is, as I'm going to share here, a win-win opportunity. So these are the key takeaways, and then Angie and I are going to take your questions and comments, and really put in to slido.com hashtag CL Wellbeing, anything that we can help with. So first of all, that coaching up is proactive. You're going to do it before you're called on the carpet. So you really want to be ready and do it before things get really tough. It's also very respectful. You're respectful of the fact that your boss can't understand what's going on in your head, can't understand the stressors that you're dealing with, can't understand your health issues very well. So you're respecting their limitations, and you're doing it in a way that helps them with their job. You are going to be prepared, and you're going to have solutions, hopefully, that are low cost, no cost, and easy to integrate into the workday, if that's possible. And you're going to bring those forward, but you're also going to be open to compromise. And that is it. Let me hear what you think. Do you have other ideas? Is there another way to approach this that maybe I haven't thought about? And let them talk. And then also to say that your whole attitude, your whole approach is that it is win-win. It's good for them. It's good for you. All right, let's get to the juicy part and see what questions. Whoa, there's some up there already.
There certainly are. So I just first want to say thank you very much, Marianne and Angie. Time has just flown by. And I think there's two key takeaways that I've really heard both of you, I think, actually mentioned. It's really come to the conversation well planned out. And I think, Angie, you even said, like, if you need to write some things down going into that conversation, just so that you kind of stay on point with what you were prepared to talk about, and then also be prepared to offer up solutions yourself, but again, be willing to hear what they have to say. So I wanted to remind everybody that yes, you can place your questions in Slido if you wish, or we already have some great questions there that if you want a thumbs up and kind of drive those to the top, that will be great. So maybe the first one is, how do you address an issue where your manager is the one making your work a challenge? Should you speak with them or their superiors? And Marianne, this reminds me of one of the resources in Workplace Strategies. I think it's called My Boss is Stressing Me Out. So I'll turn it over to you two to address the first question.
Okay, Angie, I'll let you take a first crack at this one, and then I'll add a bit in.
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of us have been here, right? And so that is challenging. I would say one thing I wonder is have you tried having that conversation with your manager? And so in terms of like having that conversation around not blaming them necessarily, but maybe even just being curious about, you know, um, if they're making your work a challenge, what are the characteristics of why they're doing that, and maybe like coming at it from a different angle. So, is it a workload issue? Is it not them not being clear about what they're asking you to do? And so sort of looking at it from those lenses, and then framing a conversation around that. So just as an example, so if your manager is making the work a challenge and it's related to your workload, for example, approaching the conversation like I'm feeling quite at capacity. I've been asked to do a lot. Can we talk about what are the priorities? What things I should be focusing on first? I feel like I'm maybe I'm not I won't be able to do as good a job if I'm being asked to do all of these things. Can we talk about like what you would like me to focus on, for example? So I think it comes down to like how are they making your work a challenge, and sort of looking at sort of the root cause of that and trying to speak with them about that. And that would be my first step, rather than going to their superiors. What do you think, Marianne?
Yeah, absolutely. I would not go to their superiors unless it was harassment or, at that level. I would absolutely speak with them first, but use the coaching up approach. If it's that I don't do well with interruptions. If somebody raises their voice to me, it's difficult. There's a whole section on workload stress, so if that's where it is, you can look and see some of the things there. But I would not go to their superior until I have made an honest attempt to talk to them, because that's not fair. You don't want your coworkers going to your boss about you without talking to you. So we'll keep going here, Laurel, to try and get some more in.
Yeah. So the next question, what are the techniques to use when you are performing well, but still not getting the next role? So I'm going to assume that's making reference to promotions. How to approach your manager or your leader in these situations.
Yeah. So there's another resource called the Career Review that I recommend. First of all, you go and you look at that, because it really gets you ready for what your strengths are, what you think you can do, what you want to do, so that when you have the conversation that you're prepared. So it's called Career Review. It's on Workplace Strategies. But the way that you go to them is just say, I'd like to talk to you about the potential for promotion or moving on. When's a good time? And let them tell you what's available, and say, what would I need to do? How would you measure that I'm ready for that role? So get concrete and specific. Angie, anything to add?
Yeah, I think for that too, a lot of organizations have their job descriptions available. So if you have your eye on a specific role, looking at some of the legwork that you could do is maybe looking at that job description and the competencies for that role, and then having that sort of as you're jumping off board when you're looking to speak to your manager about promotion opportunities, and what you can do if you're missing certain competencies, like then talking about development, right? And what is needed in order to get to that next step.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great.
Laura?
And the next question seems to be how to shift the tone of a meeting. So how do you make a meeting that feels like a power dynamic into a constructive conversation?
Yeah, I would say that you have to come up with an agreement about how people are going to interact. And again, on the website, there's the team agreement process, but specifically, this is what we will do in a meeting. This is what we won't do. This is how we're going to support each other. This is how we're going to have differences of opinion. I like to say that managing people is almost impossible because somebody gave them free will, but managing behaviors and having an agreement about how we're going to talk to each other is much better because then we can hold each other accountable. Angie?
Yeah, agreed. I think, I have certainly been caught off guard in some meetings, where yeah, there's been power dynamics that have been a surprise. And I think, as much as possible, if you can go into those meetings with almost like ground rules for how we act and how we speak to each other, that goes a long way. If in the meeting it goes sideways, I think at that point there's a decision that needs to be made around chatting with certain individuals afterwards, directly about what happened, and making sure that, if there were sometimes, like maybe there's power dynamics because that person was stressed out that day, or they had received bad news, or there was something else, right? Like don't make up any stories in your mind. Like you can always have a conversation with people afterwards, to try and like suss out, the situation, and if there was a way to resolve that, so that doesn't happen in future in particular.
Thank you.
Right.
Well,
The next question, I like this one because it kind of suggests that you and your leader are working as a pair trying to come up with some solutions. But the question is, what if you're trying really hard and you're putting in the effort, but the solutions you and your leader have come up with are not working, or your leader has no suggestions or solutions?
mhm.
Hmm.
So the answer to this is it depends, right? It depends what the issue was. It depends what the solutions were. But there's a tool called the workload reflection and discussion tool where it guides the employee to think about what's going on, what's causing stress, what's getting in the way. And it really walks them through a process that might lead them to come up with a better solution. And then they can make that suggestion. And to make sure that the solutions are aimed at helping you do the work, not helping improve your life, which may not ever happen because of a work situation. You may need to get treatment, you may need to resolve personal issues, but in terms of work, it can be very straightforward how to help you do the tasks. There's another piece called supportive task improvement. So if there's a particular task that you're not doing as well as other people are, that you're struggling with, you can use that as well. Angie?
Yeah, I think, sometimes things may not go the way that you're expecting them to go, and that's just reality, unfortunately. So if something that you're trying, or the solutions that you're trying to implement aren't working, or your leader has no suggestions, I think there's a question there around, is that worth shelving for now? Sometimes, certain solutions maybe it's not the right time for that, or maybe they're, whoever it is you're trying to advocate to, if they're not on board, then maybe that's something that that you try again in 6 months. I found sometimes in this situation, I've planted seeds, right? So, and I've had to be okay with that for now. I've said my piece. I've suggested solutions. They're not being taken at the time, but 6 months or a year down the road, maybe it's worth raising again and trying to see if that's the right time. So I'm making some assumptions about the question, but I hope that's helpful.
Yeah.
All right, keeping your boss's focus. So how do you get your boss to hear you or keep their attention focused on the issue you would like to discuss and not get off topic?
So this is kind of a cheeky approach, but I know what they're talking about. I've been that person who's off topic and going here and there. And I've also worked with people who have done that. And sometimes what you actually can do is write, help me reduce distractions at work on a piece of paper, and then say, okay, and turn it to them and say, but what about this? Yeah, oh, right. Thank you for that. But what about this? And actually hold them to it in that format. Angie?
Yeah. Yeah, I think really important. So like if it's a meeting, for example, like sending your intentions before the meeting, reiterating your points during the meeting about the thing that you're trying to talk about, and just keep bringing it back, right? So I think um, conversations can go off in tangents, and that happens all the time. And so I think, if you come at it very clearly from the beginning on this is the thing that I want to resolve today, then you can keep that allows you to keep coming back, and that sets the stage for that conversation in particular.
Yeah, thanks.
Great. Next one is, what if you and your leader, you agree on the intended outcome and performance gap, but they disagree or disregard your solution, recommended methods, and they see this as not willing to change?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, so what approach do you want me to use to narrow this gap? Like, I'm looking for solutions, or if, there are none, can I try some things out to do it? And rather than asking for solutions that come from them, things they have to do, ask if you can just implement things yourself. Angie?
Yeah, I think this is like we talked about, like this is being open to compromise, right? So I think asking them what they would like you to do is a great approach. I'm just trying to I'm rereading the question again. And I think it sounds like you've come with maybe options, but again, remembering that not all your options may not always be the ones that they choose. So just being willing to be flexible and compromise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Next
Kayla?
one, as a first-year manager, well, congratulations. How do you balance advocating for your own growth while still prioritizing and supporting your team?
This question came from a first-year manager, because a longtime manager would know that your own growth comes from prioritizing and supporting your team. that is where it is. And the things that are just for you are not as important as the things that you can do for your team. That's what makes you a better manager, makes you a better leader. And so just reframe this about by saying, how can I advocate for prioritizing and supporting my team through my own growth and development? It's like they are the same thing. If you want to lead your team well, that's your growth. That's your development as a manager, and then as an executive, it's the same thing. Because I'll just add this one thing that somebody said to me once, is that it doesn't matter how great you are at balancing the budget and executing the strategic plan. If you can't optimize the energy, focus, and commitment of your team members, you will always be scrambling and overwhelmed. If you put all your attention on how do I optimize them to do their job, you will be much more successful. Oh, I know we're running out of time, so we'll let Angie take the next one, and we'll try and shorten our answers here to get some more questions in.
Sure. So they're bouncing all over the place. Let me just see here. So how do you approach a situation where you are new to a role and receiving feedback to be more proactive? How do you coach up when you haven't had time to prepare?
Yeah, I think that's okay. Like I think this goes back to the thing that I said earlier about having multiple conversations and building that relationship over time. So even in, if you just got feedback and you're a little blindsided by that, that's okay. There's always opportunities to have conversations again at a later time. So I think, you can prepare yourself to coach up for the next conversation. And yeah, I think I'm just rereading the question. I think that's probably the best approach. Like in the moment, sometimes it can be difficult. But again, like I said earlier, it's just practice, right? And so if you don't need to be hard on yourself if you weren't able to coach up in that particular situation on the spot. That's okay. You can try and do it again next.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I just want to thank everybody for your great questions. That really helped kind of round out our presentation or our event today. If you're looking for more information and online resources on today's topic, including several helpful micro-learning modules, please scroll down on the webinar pager and click on Download Resources for the list. And as always, please check out the Workplace Strategies for Mental Health website for a range of resources to support organizations, leaders, employees, and their families. It's available to all Canadians at no cost, compliments of Canada Life. So to close out today's session, I would like to thank Marianne and Angie for their time, insight, and expertise. Myself and our Canada Life team would also like to thank you for taking the time to listen and to contribute with your great questions. This session has been recorded and will be available on our Workplace Strategy for Mental Health YouTube channel in a few days. From all of us here, we wish you a healthy and safe summer and look forward to seeing you at our next public webinar in the fall. Thank you very much.